Arshdeep is part of my current batch of Gauntlet, the Gauntlet that's going on right now. What was the question that you had that you wanted to bring up?
It's just that I have seen all those patterns in my parents, like where you feel like they could have separated 20 years ago. And
Right.
right now, I think I'm very afraid of commitment. And
Hmm.
because somehow I feel like I don't want to repeat the patterns of my parents have, because I have subconsciously imbibed them. And I know I have those patterns where I fawn a lot.
Yeah. That's a really, really good question where you have seen your parents do that. Like most of us are trying to commit and overcommit, right? So seeing a situation of like your parents where you don't want to commit, that's something we don't often talk about, but it is a very like strong reality for a lot of us. So I thank you for asking that question. Now, the important thing is that the baseline of that answer is still the same. What you're feeling right now is the ego stepping into a protective mechanism and saying to the inner child, I will protect you from rejection. I will protect you from the bad things of commitment. I will protect you from like being in that same situation by just avoiding commitment, right? And so subconsciously what happens is even if you try to date someone, you'll invite someone into your life who at the end of the day will not be able to commit, will be in another country, may leave to go somewhere else. Am I right? I can see by the smile on your faces that this is probably a pattern, right?
Yeah, that's a pattern.
Yeah, and that's, that's how we like create these psychological associations. Like that's how I knew this would happen because we attract into our lives what we believe in and what we're feeling right now. So the important thing for you, Arshdeep, is to do the inner work, go back to like working with the inner child and the reparenting process, much like you're doing, to tell yourself that your level of love and commitment will not end up the same way as your parents. You are not your parents. You are very different. And that's why the inner work, what you're doing is you're actually breaking that generational trauma by saying, I am not like my parents, and I'm not, because your parents, who they were when they attracted each other, it could have been an arranged marriage, it could have been any other situation where they were in that, and then they chose not to, like, be able to separate from it. But you're not in that situation just because of the exposure you already have, the healing you're doing for yourself, the inner work that you're doing for yourself. And so what that does now is, if you tell yourself that I am more loved, I am more wholesome, and I am more complete, I can make strong decisions for myself, I can choose good partners for myself. If you start healing yourself and doing that, then you'll stop fearing the outcome of commitment. You see? Does that make sense?
Yeah. A part of me believes the outcome of commitment is losing my freedom. Like I have to kind of give in to my partner's needs, demands, or his.
Right. So I want to ask you, where does that idea come from?
Of course, my mom.
Okay, good. So it's from seeing your mom constantly suppressed by maybe your dad, your uncle, any of the male figures in the family, right?
Yes, yeah.
Now, where do you think in your life right now, do you actually have, or are you in that situation like that, where the men in your life constantly suppress you, or they eliminate your like ideas and beliefs or voice?
Not really, but I do live with my brothers, and it like there are some times like where my opinions really didn't count. I mean, if I want to move somewhere, I wouldn't be able to move unless they give in as well.
Right. So why is it that they have to give in for you to move?
Because we are together, and it feels like that's how our parents want us to be.
Aha. So here's the good question. You see how it's coming back again to, I want my parents' approval, so therefore I'm willing to do what I can here or whatever is needed so that I get them to approve of it, right? So you don't want to move away if it'll disappoint your parents,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's
So
true.
can you see that right now it's not your parents who are actually suppressing your voice. It's your belief of yourself that's suppressing your voice. So you believe that if you were to choose what you wanted for your own fulfillment, that it would 100% disappoint your parents. And there's nothing that can come back from it. So you're doing whatever you can to not give yourself freedom. You are actually not giving your own self the freedom because you're scared that the freedom is what will disappoint your parents. See?
Yeah, it's twisted.
It's confusing because what you're doing and what we can do very easily in this situation is we can blame the parents. And we can say the parents are the ones who say, don't move, don't move, don't move. And so we can say that the parents are the ones who are taking away the freedom because they're the ones saying, don't move, don't do this, etc., right? We can say that very easily. But in this situation, I asked you first, are you really in a situation where people are suppressing your voice, people are chaining you down, people are holding you? And you said, no, it's just me and my brothers and a choice of where we want to go. But then the second question and your second statement is, but I'm still not making a decision to want to go somewhere or move or whatever else because it'll disappoint my parents. So really, they're not holding you down as so much as you are lying down, wanting to be held down. So that you say to them, okay, can I be your daughter now? And you think they'll say, okay, yes, now you can be my daughter. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
So you're already submitting yourself because you think by submitting and fawning in that position, you will get their approval.
I'm constantly working for it, I think.
Yeah. And so that it's the baseline of what we all do, Arshdeep. So it's not, I don't want you to feel like, any shame that you're doing this because it's what we all do. But the reason we're doing it, can you tell me why we want their approval more than ours? What is the baseline of why we're always doing this fawning?
So I'll be loved, I guess.
Exactly. But now what happens if I give you a magic potion, right? And this magic potion is called inner work. It's called mirror work. It's called the Ho'oponoponos that we do, the journaling. What if I gave you this magic potion and said, but if you want to be loved and I give you this potion which allows you to feel love, will you go back there then?
No.
There you go. And that's the answer, is that the freedom and the commitment, both of those things are just the ego's responses. Those are just the wounded ideas, which either way will still get you your parents' connection or approval. And so subconsciously, what you're doing right now is you're saying, my opinion comes last. My choice comes last. My desire comes last. You're saying that even before your parents say that to you. That's what the problem is. So instead, if you start to tell yourself, my opinion is important, my choice is important, my life is important, what I want from work is important, the type of man I choose is important, the type of job I choose is important, you will automatically meet some resistance with your parents, no doubt. Because your parents want to perpetuate their same problems onto you. Did you hear about what I talked about generational trauma in the beginning?
Yes.
So their idea is what they know they'll give you, right? So they'll just pass that same shit onto you. So if you try to resist it, if you try to change yourself and to break that, it'll create some friction with them, no doubt. But you give yourself a chance to a much, much, much better life that you can have. But you have to take the responsibility on to heal yourself and also to resist that generational trauma.
Yeah. I have already created so much friction where my dad now says, like, I don't know my priorities well. And that kind of brings more shame in me because I feel like at 34, I probably don't know my priorities well.
No, change that. Because only because your dad is telling you don't know what your priorities are, you are thinking, oh, I'm 34, I probably don't know what my priorities are. Because for your dad, his priorities should be your priorities. That's the same thing about generational trauma. For your dad, in his head, he doesn't realize it. And so he's, in his way, he's shaming you or guilting you or manipulating you to give him what he wants from your life. Just like what I talked about with my mom, right? You saw how crazy it is that my mom could say so easily, if you went to a good school, you'll have a great job. You'll live a brilliant life. It's so easy to excuse, right? So my dad's also like, yeah, that's probably true. So let's send them to a good school. So she convinced my dad also to do it. But the point is, do the kids even want to go to a fucking school like that? Do they even need to go to a school like that? Is that even in their lives or in their cards, in their choice? But it's what my mom thinks it should be. So the same way for you, you have to ask yourself, what my dad is telling me about my priorities or commitments in life, is it actually true? Or is it what he thinks my commitments should be in life? Because I can swear to you, like I know what origin you are of. I'm also Indian. And I've seen like so many communities all around. I'll bet your dad's like, oh my God, you're 34 and you're not married. Oh my God, what's going to happen to you? All the life that you're going to have. You shouldn't have a job like this. You should have a job like this where you can just continue to be like quiet and suppressed and whatever else, like all the other women that used to. That's what you perpetuate because that's what he knows. You want to change the story, Arshdeep. It's going to be very challenging, but you have to resist that generational trauma. You have to draw your own commitments. Like you said, you're 34. So you already should know your own goddamn commitments. You don't need your dad to tell them to you. But you need to take responsibility of owning up to them.
Yeah.
See? So to answer your original question around commitment, that's just a mask on the surface to deal with a bigger issue, a bigger wound inside. And that bigger wound is the same thing we just talked about, which is still wanting the approval of your dad, still wanting the approval of your mom. In fact, if you separate from the approval of your parents, you'll also separate from the attachment that you have to the idea of your parents and what their relationship looks like. And you'll separate from that attachment of the idea that says, my relationship is going to look just like this. In fact, you'll have so much more freedom that you'll start to see a relationship with commitment and freedom in your life. Both of them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But you can only do that if you focus inwards on yourself. You have to be able to draw that boundary with them and say, I want to discover who Arshdeep really is, not who Arshdeep, the daughter of so-and-so, really is. See?
Yeah.
So, does that make sense? Does that add value to you?
Yeah, definitely does. Like, I'm still trying to seek their approval somehow. I tell myself that I'm not, but it disturbs me if I'm not seeking their approval.
It's okay to accept that. It's not weak to say I'm seeking the approval of my parent or my boss or somebody else. It's okay because if we accept it, then we can see the pattern. If we accept it, then we can see the ego. If we accept that, yes, I do fight with my partner, I do this, then I can see, okay, this is a moment, it's coming up. Okay, time to be able to like pull back and say. But if we constantly reject it, then at that point, we're not able to actually look into what it is that's causing it. We're not able to heal it. The pattern just continues. Like if you say, I don't care about my father's approval, what are you talking about? Then you'll just continue with this process, not really realizing that subconsciously you're still working for his approval, but on the conscious scale, the ego has lied to you and said, no, you're not seeking his approval. But if we accept the truth, then you're like, yeah, I am seeking his approval. Then you tell the ego, okay, I no longer need you right now because I want to learn to move past my parents' approval. I want my approval first.
Yeah, and it's like constantly, that an anxiety when I don't get his approval for a while, that I want to go back and seek it.
Yeah, exactly. And in that case, in that point, you'll fawn even more for him and you'll do whatever he wants to be able to get his approval. That's the sad thing about difficult thing about parenting is that we don't realize we can use it as a method of control. And parents who often need to step into that method of control, often they use it too much. You have to discover who the identity is for yourself. You have to give that love for yourself. You have to give that connection for yourself, Arshdeep.
Yeah.
And then you will be able to create your own identity of who you are with such strength that you won't want to keep running to your parents right now, because otherwise soon you will start running to your partner because your partner will represent what your parents do. So.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So now it comes back to why you're even afraid of having a partner is because you're still trying to work through this problem of needing your dad's approval. And you're scared if I get a partner, then I'm going to be running after his approval.
Yes.
So in a way, it's actually good what you're doing because you want to heal the first issue before you get into the second one. So I actually think that's really valuable. What you're doing is really empowering in that place. Take the time. Don't look at it that you're running from commitment. Take the time while you have it to yourself and say, I want to work on myself. I want to heal myself. I want to love myself. I mean, you just gone through the gauntlet. You're halfway through the program. It's such a powerful way to be able to remind you of who you are, of what you're worth, and how to heal that. And as you do that, Arshdeep, you'll start realizing that you'll start listening to the outside world less and less. You'll start listening to the inside, to your inner child, most importantly, the most.